Hello and welcome to Changemakers Show, where we speak with inspiring and influential changemakers and the people who support them, live, up close, and personal. So get cozy and get ready to listen to our changemakers' stories and advice. Ask your burning questions live and get inspired by their impact so you can be and bring the change you wish to see in the world too. Now let's get started with today's show. Awesome. Okay. Let me just get off our screen share. So welcome to the show, Kai. And I just want to make sure I shared into our group. I think I got it all done in time. And we're so happy to have you on the show today. Kai Kocher, who is a resident of my hometown. So it's always fun to interview people who are closer to home, even though we are kind of the furthest from having our hands in the dirt right now, because we are linked online and live streaming from our homes. Anyways, thanks for being here, Kai.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. That's great.
So yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting you not too long ago and got to hear a little bit of your story. And I thought it would be amazing to introduce you to our community because you are really involved in a few different ways with urban farming, which is a really unique concept that I think not everybody has heard much about. So I'd love to kind of have you share some of your wisdom with our community about that, and also about the two major initiatives that you're part of, which is YYC Growers and your urban farming company, Grand Trunk Veggies, which I didn't know until I read your website, that the name originates kind of from the neighborhood. I'm in Sunnyside too, so I think we're neighbors.
Well, we used to be. I don't live in there anymore.
Oh, okay. But that's where the name came from, roughly.
Pardon?
Did the name come roughly from this part of the city then?
Yeah, so it's just the because there's the Kensington area, which is made up of Hillhurst and then Sunnyside, and then within Hillhurst there's like West Hillhurst and like regular old Hillhurst, I guess. And West Hillhurst is a new name for the suburb as of like the 50s, where formerly it used to be called Grand Trunk, and then it was a less affluent neighborhood. And so, as I understand it, citizens stopped associating with being from Grand Trunk, and so the city and just said that they were from like Hillhurst, and so the city changed the name, I think in 1947, to just West Hillhurst, and just absorbed all of Grand Trunk into the Hillhurst jurisdiction. So.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I didn't realize that until I was looking more on your website. So it's always fun to hear kind of the name origin story of different enterprises. So I want to get into all of that detail about your initiatives. But before that, we want to get to know you a little bit as a person, because, we like to talk business and strategy and impact on this show, but we also like to just get to know people as people. So one question I haven't asked on the show for a little while that I wanted to bring back today is, what is your ideal day? And I'm curious too, because you're an urban farmer, to see what makes the cut as you describe your ideal day.
My ideal day, is that an ideal work day?
Could be, could not be. If you want to describe a weekend, that's cool too.
My ideal day. Oh man. Okay, well, I think on a weekend, an ideal day is getting out of the mountains and like going skiing or going climbing. But yeah, that, there's that. But then I think on an ideal work day, during farm season, I think an ideal work day for me is to get up early, have a good breakfast, and then be out the door by like 6:30, And
That's early.
ideally, this day would be like a harvest day, and I would go and harvest lettuce for morning. And the reason I'm up so early is because I want that lettuce to be as fresh as possible. So it's going to be cold, like cool outside. And then harvest, and then come back to my like home base, to my processing area, and then spend the rest of the day washing and bagging that salad. I really like washing and bagging salad. I can just like put on a podcast, put on tunes, and just get to work. And we've got some great farm hack technology that makes it like really easy and fast to do. So I don't know. For me, that's my ideal day, and I'll do it hopefully with somebody, either my partner and business partner Laura Lee, or one of my staff or volunteer, and just
Nice.
yeah.
I like it. Go grab the food. And so actually this is a nice kind of peek into what Grand Trunk Veggies is all about. Because for those who don't know what urban farming is, or kind of the foundation of that, we'd love to ask you more about why you started it, which I'm guessing will start to explain also what it is. So let's dive into that part.
So why I started it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why I started it was I'd always wanted to be doing a job that was engaged environmentally, and I'd always have this very close connection to the environment, and I'd always had that connection much more in kind of like a connection to the natural world, and the different kind of biomes and protecting animals and that kind of stuff. And then I think I didn't have a vantage point by which to see any of the normal work, or like not normal in the sense that it is normal, but like maybe work that we would associate with that type of work. I didn't have the vantage point to see any of that work as being really what I wanted to do. It didn't seem to kind of meet all the needs. I didn't want to work as a consultant for a large corporation doing environmental assessments. I didn't really want to be working for Greenpeace doing like radical protest work. As I got older, when I was younger, I definitely, was more romanced by that. And then I think just through various readings and through like a permaculture course and conversations with people, I really made the connection that food had such a direct impact upon the environment, and that how we traditionally, and well, not traditional, how we typically get our food in the last 50 years is really disengaged from like an environmental practice. And so, a more traditional way of getting food is obviously much more engaged. So I was became interested in kind of intersection point of like the 21st century technologies and lifestyle, like urbanization, along with a more kind of holistic practice of growing food, whether it be in the city or out in like a rural area that much more meshed with the environment, like environmental, like sound environmental practice and sustainability and kind of all those buzzwords. And that's really brought me into it. And I became interested in Detroit as well. And so when I actually went to Detroit and saw the food system that had been built there in response to the collapse of kind of corporate capitalism, I really, it really hit it home for me, and it really clicked that food was perhaps a keystone of this whole kind of environmentalism that that I've been thinking about for the last 30 years of my life.
And so was that trip to Detroit, that was the first encounter you had with this idea of urban farming? Is that right?
Yeah, in an actual like practice. Yeah, I'd like heard the concept and had kind of abstract ideas of what it meant, because it wasn't really happening in Calgary at the time. And yeah, Detroit was really like a physical experience with urban.
And so how would you describe urban farming in its like simplest form, if we're just getting down to the nitty gritty?
Yeah, I think urban farming at its most barest terms would just be growing food for profit in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm. Great. And getting up at 6:30, go get that crisp lettuce.
Yeah, totally.
And so what are all the I'm straying a little bit, but just so people get a sense even more concretely, like so lettuce is definitely a major thing you can grow, because I think you can do multiple cycles in a season. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it depends on where you are in the world. Obviously, we have people watching from all over the place, but I guess for here, so lettuce. What are some of the other like major crops that you grow?
Well, some major crops that I grow: lettuce, radishes, baby beets. So just beets, but not letting them grow to like massive maturity.
Baby beets. I love that.
Yeah. Last year I did tomatoes. I don't know if I would do tomatoes going forward. Some zucchini, spinach, mostly leafy greens, like really focusing on leafy greens. And the reason for that is you want, as you said, like multiple harvests. So you want, and the reason for that is because you have a smaller amount of space typically, so you're growing intensively on less land. And the business is probably being operated by yourself or maybe one, a few other people, so you don't have this massive labor force, and you want to grow crops that have a high price point. So quick turnover, high price point. Whereas, growing potatoes, you're waiting all season to harvest them. They're taking up a lot of space, and then they're potatoes, and potatoes are, dirt cheap.
So operating this as a sustainable social enterprise too, is there's a lot of economics, like really detailed pricing that you have to keep in mind. Sounds like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There
or
are
trial and error, one or the other.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think it's a bit of both. I think with any business, it's a bit of both, right? So,
Right.
But I think the people that are really crushing it at urban farming, they've really narrowed down with those price points and the economics, and I think I don't think we're going to see a shift in like suddenly someone urban farming being like, oh, potatoes makes total sense, like
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I like that you're sharing this too, because we have a global audience, and us Canadians here's your proof that we can grow stuff here, even though we're even in Calgary. And even our winters actually aren't too bad, but the growing season is still short compared to other parts of the world. So it's impressive that you guys have been able to figure this out. I'm very impressed by it. And leading to that, the other really neat thing kind of connected to your Grand Trunk Veggies is YYC Growers. So YYC is our airport code for Calgary. So that's kind of Calgary growers. And this is a really neat initiative that you're leading now, but you've been involved kind of since the beginning. So I'd love for you to share more about what YYC Growers is, like how would you define it, and how that connects urban and kind of close rural farmers in our city. And yeah. There's a lot to it, but we'll just start with that.
Okay. Yeah. So what YYC Growers is in its current manifestation is a farmer-owned cooperative of urban and rural farms, and I mean, like in business, or primarily it is a food hub. So it is a distribution center for urban and rural farms. So there are staff, including myself, who run the business, and that business is basically procuring farms from members who are owners or non-members who we want to source from that kind of fit the ideals of the business and are local. And then customers purchase our products through YYC Growers. And so all the farmers, if you think of it as like a kind of a funnel that comes in and then like opens back out again, it's like all the product comes into this like one centerpiece and then opens back out as it goes to all the customers. So that's the first part. And then what was the second part? What is it? And
I guess, the connection back to your other work. But I think the interesting thing about, so maybe we can expand on that, or I forget exactly what my question was. So we'll just keep rolling. The cool part that I see with it is that it's solving the distribution challenge for farmers, right? And that supply is helping I guess, smooth out the supply from different farmers, because it's kind of a volatile product, right? And so as a consumer, I guess, and tell me if I'm wrong on my interpretation of this, but the cool thing as a consumer is that I can buy, is it a subscription? Is that what you call it? To YYC?
Yeah.
And then I get a steady supply of locally produced food, but I don't have to worry about if Farmer Joe doesn't have beets for me this week, because you guys have other farmers who have beets or lettuce, or like that. To me is a really neat solution to the distribution mix, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think you've summarized it really well there. Yeah, because I mean, if you think of it, either one, like a farm, it's either one on that level, like if, example, Farmer John doesn't have a product, or doesn't have enough every week to sustain a certain volume, then we can use the other farmer members to kind of, like even out that, like, I guess, procurement of that product. The other kind of advantage within that same kind of idea is that living in Calgary and around Calgary, the weather is super volatile. And so, when you start heading north of Calgary by about an hour, you actually have one of the most frequently hailed regions globally. So,
oh my God, I didn't know that.
Pretty epic hail belt, but the soil is phenomenal. So the growing conditions are phenomenal from like, I guess, like a geological standpoint, but like from a meteorologic standpoint are not necessarily the best. So, there's this vulnerability that the crops could be wiped out one week if you have a really bad hailstorm move through. And so typically the way weather moves, it doesn't like move in this gigantic swath where it'll take out, a 200-kilometer linear path. It's maybe only going to take out one or two of our farms. But if they were down for a crop and they get hit by a hailstorm, then we have other farms that we can use to make sure that our customers still get the product. And that's really important because the model that we use is built off what we call like a community supported agriculture, the CSA, where you pre-purchase a subscription. As you said, so you buy 16 weeks of produce. And in the typical model, the notion is that the customer shares, they pay up front, so the farmer gets that money up front so he can help pay for seeds and staff and gas in his tractor, et cetera, before he actually is producing anything. But the other kind of piece of that is that the customers are sharing in the risk that the farmer has to endure as a farmer every year, whether it be a bountiful year or a year of scarcity. And although I really value and think that psychological piece is really important because you have to understand the reality of food. The way that YYC has kind of reformatted that structure a little bit by allowing there to maybe not always be abundance, but at least always be product, I think is really important on the customer end for two reasons. One, because people need to eat, but also, and they should get that diversity and they've paid good money. But two, like in the 21st century, we've really restructured how people think of food and food, like getting food, because at least here in North America, I know we're talking to a global audience, so it will be different worldwide, but at least here in North America, and particularly here in Calgary, most of the food that you're getting from a grocery store is not grown locally. And most of it isn't even grown like in the next province over. It's mostly coming from BC or Chile or Mexico. And, you don't have that connection with the food. And so you expect that food, because it always does show up on time, you expect that food to always be in the grocery store when you go to get it, whether that be an avocado in, July or December, or, a mango or whatever it is. And, that's not how our ancestors acquire food. I don't think that is going to be how humans acquire food in 100 years from now, because I just think that there's a lot of change that is happening. And so to be able to create the feeling of abundance from a local standpoint, I think really kind of like nestles nicely into the idea of like this 21st century piece of abundance, but it also still puts in the consumer's mind that, by storytelling about our farm's experience, whether it be a hailstorm or a drought or whatever it is, that they're still sharing in that experience of,
Mhm.
bounty and scarcity, maybe a little bit. I don't know if that kind of lost track there a little bit.
No, yeah, no, that's awesome because you're talking about getting kind of re-educated about our food systems and also reconnected, even if it's only for certain pieces of our diet. It's still like I think it's a really neat thing because, like you said, we've lost that experience that our ancestors had with their food, and the whole food system is totally different now. And it's one of those things that you don't necessarily think about, or at least I should speak for myself. I don't necessarily think about on a daily basis until I encounter something like what you are doing, or meet other people who are having this conversation, and then it becomes in your awareness. And even if it's just a little bit at a time, I think it's a important awareness or transition to make. So yeah, no, I think it's great what you guys are doing. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on the time, but because we're all social entrepreneurs and change makers, one thing that you shared when I saw you speak last was about kind of integrating that triple bottom line into your decision making and kind of your philosophy. And I loved how you led with that. I know as social entrepreneurs, we say we're triple bottom line and we do take that into account. But when I heard you talking about your business in that context, I could tell you really live it and think about it. So, I mean, we've talked about some of the pieces, but maybe just quickly, can you share how you use that thinking as an entrepreneur in general? Like, where are the connections in your head?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we have already talked about the environmental, so that's,
Yeah.
And when talking about the triple bottom line, we've got the environmental, the economic, and then the social, or I tend to think of it more as like a cultural.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've kind of talked about the environmental, and that's through the practice of farming and just trying to farm as sustainably as possible and create more of a natural environment with the farming practice. The second piece that I often think about is the economics. And, for the first, I think as anyone who's an entrepreneur has experienced, for the first couple of years, that economic piece is almost impossible to grasp and hold on to. And it almost seems like it's untouchable or unobtainable because, most entrepreneurs are probably not paying themselves when they start. And it's very discouraging in a world where we have all these Fortune 500 companies and these unicorn businesses that start up, and that's just not the reality of probably 99% of all businesses. So for me, that was really challenging for the first couple of years to hold on to that piece of the economics. But I think YYZ Growers is really, if we hadn't built YYZ Growers, I don't think we could have, but I would have really had to rethink my business. YYC Growers really created that economic stability by creating a secure sales outlet. And so by having a company that's always buying my own farm's product means that economically there's some sustainability so that I can hire staff, etc. And then on that, within my own farm, like I'm really I don't know, I don't think everybody in YYZ Growers would agree with me, but I'm very firm that I don't want any of my farmers in YYZ Growers to be 100% invested in YYZ Growers. That should never be their primary sales outlet. It can be the primary, but it should never be 100% of all their sales. Because I think that putting all your eggs in one basket is really risky. And so for my own business as well, on top of that triple bottom line, I want to make sure that that I have my fingers or my money going or my sales going to like multiple streams, not just through YYZ Growers, but dealing with restaurants as within my own business, and then dealing one-off with customers, etc. And just coming up with different ways there, and then also just how I go about getting that money. Just really wanting to work with companies who value those other concepts of what I'm doing. And, you know, if that means not selling to a business because they just want the product, but maybe don't see the bigger picture that I'm working towards, then, then that's, I think, the price that I'll pay is to not do business with that company, because I think that that's really important. Yeah, I mean, the economic one is maybe more challenging to talk about, because I don't think about it as much, other than that I really just want to get paid and have a livable wage. And Obviously Growers is built on the platform of empowering farmers through fair, livable pay in a context like Alberta, which has a pretty high standard of living.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece is the cultural one, and that's really what I've latched onto in the last couple of years. I think because actually that the cultural one, and I don't know if the triple bottom line, maybe I can never remember how the nesting. It's kind of like I've seen it pictured as kind of like nesting dolls, and I can't remember which one's on the bottom, but for me it's really the cultural one, because I think that one's really easy in the context of food, because food and culture, I think, are they're not synonymous, but they're really netted together. And so for me, a lot of this comes from the cultural landscape of how do we create a food system that really reflects our values as a people in a global society, and that then reflects the environmental and economical needs of our society as well. So growing food in a climate that makes sense, and eating food in a climate that makes sense, and then paying the prices that make sense in that climate to get good, nutritionally dense food. And then lastly, on that cultural and social piece, is just I think food is exquisite. I think I grew up around really, really good food. My mom is a phenomenal cook, and I just think that food is such an integral and important part of connecting with people and in connecting with the earth, that I don't know, you need to participate in a way that's not disengaged. And so to be really engaged in the food that you eat, I don't know, I want to see more delicious food, more nutrient dense food, better food for people, and the connection to where that food is coming from. So
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love how thoughtful you are with all those pieces. And because like I said, this is all important to many of us as entrepreneurs, but it's great to hear it so deeply articulated, and you can tell you've given it a lot of thought and chosen this career and this path very purposefully to hit some of those values and goals. So I think it's a great conversation to have. So yeah, I had so many questions for you, but we'll just maybe hit on two more quickly, because I really want to ask, let's see, which one should I skip to? I'm curious, because we're talking about the triple bottom line, right? And profits and impact. And in this case, really heavy on the environment side. I mean, the social piece is weaved in there, but I think the impact really that you're most creating is with the environment piece. So have you encountered a time when you really had to make a tough decision about those two pieces in conflict, the profits and the impact piece, and how did you navigate that? Because it's something we're all going to run into.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Not so much with Grand Trunk Veggies. I think Grand Trunk Veggies, there are minor things I could talk about, but I think more as YYC Growers. I feel so right now I've taken on full-time running YYC Growers, and one of the biggest challenges of living in a place like Calgary is in the winter, because we run a full year program, is how to not discourage customers who have been trained with different eating habits, right? And so they have expectations. So in the winter harvest box, we call our subscriptions a harvest box. It's obviously going to be a lot of root vegetables, turnips, carrots, beets, etc., like things that you can store. And then we have a greenhouse that is a member, and that's kind of it. So it's a little bit limited. So there are other greenhouses that we can work with, but even just in, like working with a greenhouse is already like really fraught with a lot of challenges for me on the environmental aspect because um, a 1 acre or bigger greenhouse in Alberta in February comes with really huge um, energy costs, right?
Right.
And it's not sustainable. And um, there's I've seen reports that argue that maybe that buying food from California that's organic is less detrimental than buying local food that is grown non-organically, so grown with pesticides. And YYC Growers is like pesticide and herbicide free. But then I also wonder if there's like that same argument can be made as like if the shipping costs of shipping stuff from California that's sustainable are pretty much negligible, do they also override like growing a tomato in February in Calgary and the cost it takes to heat a greenhouse in -40? So that I really struggle with that. And the way that I kind of wade through it is I really need to think about my customers because unfortunately you're running a business. And I feel like that's a very slippery slope because you can go down that path. You can definitely go down that path and always justify it because you're trying to handle your customers. But eventually there will be a backlash based on the kind of culture that you've built around your business for your customers. So your customers are going to expect something from you. And if you don't meet their expectations, they're also going to be disappointed. So you're weighing, do the customers want tomatoes that are local, or do they want us to be true to only being like as sustainable as we possibly can? And so the way I mostly deal with it is actually just survey our customers and try to get a feel for what they really want, look for feedback, and then deal with the criticism as it comes. And just ask questions. And then always the bigger pictures in the back of my mind. And so while I might order, like I'm in this position right now where I'm probably going to have to order cucumbers and tomatoes and stuff from this very large greenhouse that's local in February, and they don't spray. So they meet a lot of our mandates, but, is it environmentally sustainable? In my opinion, absolutely not. However, if YYC Growers fails as a company, we also lose the opportunity to grow a business that could be a sustainable greenhouse because it's not like that technology doesn't exist. And so as the technology advances, as the desire to get into this industry advances, if YYC Growers can exist as a company and become an incubator for new farm startups, then there's more of an opportunity down the road. So
yeah, you're kind of weighing the short term. So it's not only the customer perceptions, but then it's your true mandate, which takes time to educate your customers on the reality of the options, right? Because they have a perception.
Totally.
And then weighing that short term payoff or value to the long term, what you can achieve. Yeah, it's tough.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and we're a co-op, right? So I've got 19 farms that own the business that I'm just like president or like CEO of, however you want to contextualize it. So I have to respond to all of them as well. And so I typically use them as a sounding board. Like I will throw stuff at them and be like, what are our thoughts on this? Like, are we happy to go down this road? Are we not happy to go down this road? And that really helps guide it as well. So it's not like it's just me just being like, well, how do I?
Yeah. And like you said, you're including the customer base too, which I think is huge. And that's really wise advice for people, business owners to, check in with our people and get their opinions, especially because we tend to value that collaboration and that insight as a community, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to. It's
Top
the
down.
easiest way. It's the easiest way to get that information,
Yeah.
They've chosen your business for a reason. And so, I think you need to respect that choice that they've made and really hear from them because, it might not have been challenging to get them at the beginning, but it might be challenging to keep them, and it will be really challenging if you lose them to get them back.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's a good point. So that's a perfect segue into my last question for you, which is, what is your best advice for other entrepreneurs in this space, whether they're super into the environment or just more in general, trying to balance all of these decisions and goals as business owners, as social entrepreneurs?
what's my biggest piece of advice?
Yeah.
Okay. Boy.
It doesn't have to be profound. Any kind of
Yeah.
tip. Yeah.
No, I know. I'm just thinking like what has really guided me. I think I really think communication is like the number one thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
you could be the most brilliant person out there, but if you're not and when I say communication, what I mean by communication mostly is actually just listening, and like not really you talking at all,
Yeah.
because you need to hear what is actually, like, either whether you need to hear what is actually in demand from like a consumer standpoint, or whether you need to hear your customers problems, or whatever it is. You need to really listen before you kind of like materialize any plan to go forward, because I think that and this is reflective in business all the time. When businesses are reactionary and just react how they think they need to react, and it's not how their customers expected it, it will go very badly. And I just think that that's true in everything, and whether it's dealing with your customers or your staff or anything. I think communication is key, and we live in a world where there are all these different communicative tools now, whether it's social media or email or face to face, God forbid, um,
Or virtual face to
or
face.
virtual face to face. And I just can't stress enough how, if you are patient and really listen and then form your ideas off of that, just I think that really counts for a lot. I don't know if that's really.
Yes, I love that. That's so, so important. And is a practice, right? It's not like you wake up one day and you're a perfect listener and communicator, but it's kind of that journey to go through that process with your community and your customers. And it's going to change every day, right? So
Total, yeah. And actually, like, that's like, a practice is a good way to put it. And I think that practice is a good way to just like frame business in general. It's a really I really like to think of these things as more like, it is like a meditative process, and you work on it and refine it and improve. And some days are better than others, and some days historically are better than the ones that you'll have in the future. But you just keep working on
you
that
just keep
practice.
going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's so many good nuggets that you shared with us today. Final thing is, where can people get in touch with you if they want to see more about what you're up to? And if you have any kind of links or resources you want us to share, we can pop them into the episode later.
Okay.
But yeah, what's the best place?
Yeah, I mean, if you just want to reach out and like send me an email, that's great. Probably the easiest is just my name, Kai, Kye, at yycgrowers.com. So yeah, shoot me an email that way. And then my farm, Grand Trunk Veggies, is on Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. That's a great, if you just want to follow me that way, that'd be great too. And then I'm doing this video series with a chef, where we're trying to educate people about making all these different dishes with the ingredients from the Harvest Box. And so
Nice.
YouTube channel, which is pretty unattended at the moment because we've just started. And that's just another Grand Trunk. There's just a Grand Trunk Veggies, and we're also putting that on the YYZ Growers Facebook. So lots of ways you can follow me or hunt me down, and yeah.
Wonderful. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kai, for being with us today and sharing your wisdom and your part of your journey, and educating, I'm sure, a lot of people more insight into this idea of urban farming, and also the co-op model is just a beautiful model. So I love that we got to talk about both and how they connect together. So yeah, thanks so much. If you guys are watching the replay or tuning in now and want to get notified when we have new guests on the show, you can go to changemakersassociation.com/show. And on that page, we also have all of our past episodes from really inspiring changemakers. And Kai, we will have you on that page shortly. And so thanks everyone for watching. And we're, again, very grateful that you were here with us today, Kai. Thanks so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's always great to talk about stuff you're doing.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.